Warning, this review will contain spoilers, potentially, maybe. Do not watch this unless you have completed the game yourself, or if you don't really care. Thank you. How's it going? If you haven't seen me be autistic about the Harry Potter movies and rank them and review them each individually, then you're probably unaware of the fact that I have been excited for Hogwarts Legacy for about as long as it's been announced now. I was initially going to make a series where I review the movies and then the books and then the games and then finish that with Hogwarts Legacy. But if I'm being completely honest with you, I was fine reviewing the movies because I wanted to get my opinions out on them anyway and put them in a format where instead of the next time someone asking me how bad Goblet of Fire is, I can just redirect them to a YouTube URL and then watch me get very angry about Goblet of Fire and know what I am angry about. Reviewing the books takes time. It would take the time of me actually bothering to read them, which, oh no, tragedy, 2023, can't be bothered reading a book. I know the feeling. Hey, stand in solidarity with me, fellow ADHD sufferers, benefactors. And reviewing each individual game on each individual platform, like I said I would, I didn't know how many versions of Philosopher's Stone exist, but I'm not sure if you've ever taken the time out of your day to find out, but I'm not doing that. I decided. If I ever do a review of all the games, it'll be of all the PC versions of the games, which is easy because eventually they all just become the same version. Kind of. The main thing to note from that video declaring my intentions to create that series is that I have a little spiel somewhere, I think at the start or middle of it. I think I edited it to be in the start, but there's a little rant I go on about how much of a fan of Harry Potter I am, and about how deeply ingratiated it is. It became in my life very early on. Well, I was babysat once when I was like 4, or I don't remember. I was very, 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 very young. I was born in 97. 97's the year that Philosopher's Stone came out. I'm pretty sure the movie was 2001, about then. So I would have been about 4 or 5 years old, and the babysitter was a massive fan of Harry Potter, and she was like, hey, let's watch this new movie that came out, Philosopher's Stone, and that movie instantly latched onto the dopamine receptors in my brain, and from that moment onwards, I was basically hooked on the shit. My point being that I've had this stuff drip-fed into my neurons since my earliest memory. I'm nearly confident that if you were to scrape the bottom of my brain cells for the earliest memory you could find, it would be me watching Philosopher's Stone with that babysitter. I have no other memory before that time. So this franchise has been in my life for as long as my memory persists. As a franchise, the Wizarding World doesn't really get that many good video games, because up until now, or up until about recently, every single video game you would get for Harry Potter would have been a movie tie-in exclusively. So like all the games would be based on the movies as closely as they possibly could be, like nearly one-to-one exclusively portraying the movies, all the way from 1 till 7. Even the Deathly Hallows video games were in 2 parts. Do I have to say any more? And then we got the mobile games, like, what's it called? The Puzzles and Spells, which is like, it's Candy Crush, but with Harry Potter. It's not a real fucking game. Oh, Wizards United. Oh, is it Unite or United? I said it in the other video, but like, oh, it's set like in present time. The Wizards United is the reason we have a lot of the current lore we have about Harry Potter, stuff set in like in the 2010s to 2020s. Wizards United was a major reason that we know anything about any of that, as well as Cursed Child, but we all know how we feel about that piece of shit. And then we got, what is it? Hogwarts Mystery? Yeah, Hogwarts Mystery, I think it's called. The mobile RPG, which the story so far that I was up to when I was playing, and then when I read about from the wiki, it's a pretty good story, but you gotta pay $300, like $300 a day in order to even play it regularly. If you wanted to complete an entire year's worth of content in a week, you'd be spending so much money just to get to that point. Unless you waited it out, but if you waited it out, you'd be waiting months on end to make any progress. It's yeah, the story's great, but the game's shit. Fuck off. So, like, there hasn't been that much competition in the Wizarding world in terms of, like, good video games. You look over at Star Wars, and you got shit like Force Unleashed, which I had a friend gush at me about, actually, the other night. Apparently a very good game. What's it called? KOTOR, Knights of the Old Republic 1 and 2. You've got the original Battlefront games and the newer Battlefront games, unfortunately, because the newer Battlefront on PC is unplayable, but still, and there's also, like, the old games like Super Star Wars and, like, all the other nonsense. Like, Star Wars as a franchise has been inundated with good video games, like, from the start, because it's an older franchise, so of course it dominated that industry of the video game market for a bit. I can't even imagine what, like, like a Harry Potter game on the SNES would have looked like if Harry Potter released earlier and had a presence in that gaming market. I can't imagine, but we caught on long enough for it to be on the Xbox and PS2 and PS3 markets and all that, and what we got was not even comparable to Star Wars. There were good games, of course there was, like the famous Chamber of Secrets game, which everyone swears by, can I speak English, to this day as being one of the best Harry Potter games in that franchise. I disagree. I personally think either Order of the Phoenix or the Half-Blood Prince video games were magnificent. I'm a bit biased towards the Half-Blood Prince video game because of the potion minigame. Order of the Phoenix had wizard chess in it, though, and had gobstones, actually, and also you could cast dueling spells on students in the hallway, which, if this game allowed you to do that, there'd be a lot of bodies everywhere. The problem, even with the best of those video games, like Chamber of Secrets or Order of the Phoenix, or whichever one you may hold true to your heart, at the end of the day, they were all movie tie-in games. Not a single one was original. They were all, not a single one was like a proper RPG, because of course you were following the story of Harry and his friends, so you had to follow a strict timeline, a strict story there. That we'll get to that. What all of us in the fandom have wanted since pretty much inception of the franchise is an RPG video game that let you make your own choices and design your own character and have your own builds and shit and play how you want and interact with the world how you want in a fully realized Hogwarts, in a fully realized open world game with all the sort of nitty-gritty details, that little nitty-gritty details that have been dumped in from the books, and being as true and faithful to the source material as possible. The idea of making something that is even alike to Hogwarts Legacy for decades was considered just something that wasn't going to happen, because most people pretty much agreed that the amount of work and love required to craft a single-player RPG to the extent that we want it to be, and with the amount of detail and with the amount of choice you can have, and how fun it would be and how interactive it would be, is pretty much not going to happen. It would be way too many resources, it would take way too much time, it would staunchly require a development team that gave a shit about the source material to such a point that they'd be willing to put in hundreds of hours of work just to craft an experience that we've always wanted. For the longest time, we pretty much accepted that that was never going to happen. And then Hogwarts Legacy came along. We are constantly getting projects that should be given to development teams of people who actually give a shit about the products that they're trying to make, or at the very least about the source material of the product. In similar cases, you can look at the Rings of Power, Shadow of Mordor, if we're looking at Tolkien's work, or if we're looking at Velma, or The Witcher, or the Resident Evil. We are in an era of so many remakes and remasters and what have you, and development of projects that are in the hands of people who actively hate the thing that they are working on, or actively hate the thing it came from, to such a degree that they are willing to bastardize the work in order to either make a point about, like, the political messaging behind the product, or about how much better they are at writing it than the original creator. Rings of Power. So all of these factors combined, the whole, it's an insurmountable task, it's a lot of work, it would require a dev team with a lot of care and a lot of attention to the source material with all these little details, all these things that needed to go together into the perfect storm in order to make the game we've always wanted. It was seen as something that could never happen, to the point where that most people gave up. I know I did. I remember, to this day, I remember how I felt beating the Deathly Hallows Part 1 and 2 games on the Wii, and just feeling empty and, like, dead inside, knowing that the IP is pretty much guaranteed to never have a good game, especially, not even just a movie tie-in, but to never have a good game that would come close to the game we've always wanted. That was the situation for decades, and we just sat there with our hands on our asses thinking about how long it's going to take before we actually even get a chance to experience the game that we've been wanting to experience. It was simply a dead wish. It was something that we wanted and were asking for and practically begging for. Before Hogwarts Legacy was announced, before I even knew whether or not it was good, and well before launch, I was still, like, going through, like, top 10 lists and other articles and shit, looking for a good Magic RPG, and I kept being recommended Skyrim, and I want to... I want to commit crimes against people who say that Skyrim is a good Magic RPG simulator game. Because it's not. Or like, Wizard of Legend, or even Oblivion. Someone told me to get on Oblivion. There's so many games that are almost there. Like, almost a good Magic RPG, or like a good action-adventure Magic-focused game. But none of them came close to what I actually wanted. Of all the hundreds of games I was recommended constantly between articles and between videos of people who are also in a similar rut to me, Stella J, go to his channel, he's got a good video on this, that the state of Magic games in the gaming industry is so dry and bitter. There's such a lack of options when it comes to a fully realized magical-focused RPG for a single-player experience. When Hogwarts Legacy was announced, I was convinced it would not live up to the expectations it was trying to set forth. I was so confident that there would be at least one thing about the game that would fail to win me over to such a degree that would ruin the rest of the game for me, or there'd be a culmination of issues that, when brought together, would make me hate playing the game. Or maybe it just doesn't live up to, like, one aspect or another good enough, like the combat not being good enough, or the crafting mechanics and all the resource gathering being tedious and boring, or the open world not being big enough, or the world itself not feeling alive enough, or Hogwarts itself not being alive enough as well, or like fully realized with all the secrets and the scale and the feeling of living in this old decrepit castle learning magic from a curriculum. Especially also considering that the only noteworthy games Avalanche Studios... Is it studios or software? Oh no, I'm becoming Reddit. It doesn't help that the only thing the dev team worked on beforehand that was of note was, I think, Cars and Disney Infinity? That really didn't help me with my expectations of the game. I was beyond confident it wouldn't live up to what I want it to be. And that's pretty much how my viewpoint remained all the way leading up till release, was a feeling of absolute assurity that there was no way that this dev team could possibly craft a game even close to what I've been asking for my entire childhood and have massive standards for, because I'm a picky bitch like that. I forgot when the game was announced, and I don't need to remember, but I remember it being announced and then not getting any news for a huge while, and then getting like a release date, like an alleged release date that was then delayed again till I remember it was delayed till 2023, which they stuck to that release date, but it was but that delay really hit. I think that was announced in November. But after they announced the delay, they started releasing more gameplay and more footage of the game and more details, very slowly, mind you, extremely slowly. Molasses-driven slowly. Eventually they released more stuff like the Dark Arts Arena gameplay trailer, which I watched on loop like 18 times. I remember the trailer before they revealed the Dark Arts Arena. Near the very end showed the player using Avada Kedavra, and I remember distinctly saying to my friends before that came out, if it is confirmed that you can use the Unforgivable curses in Hogwarts Legacy, I will buy it on release day. When I saw that you could use Avada Kedavra in that trailer, I pre-ordered it. Sometime in January, we started to see content creators actually go to the devs team studio and to play the game. They'd play a very set pieces of the game, like one mission, and they were allowed to explore Hogwarts on Broom, and they were allowed to do very little. But from what little I did see of the game, it kind of started winning me over. It could come close to being that game I've always wanted it to be. Eventually, by the time I had seen the second content creators' preview of the game uploaded to their channels, and then I started seeing the Dark Arts Arena playthrough, that was when I started choosing to get hyped for the game. Since about the mid-2010s, I have developed certain trust issues with developers and game releases. I can name... If given enough time, I could name a lot, but the first couple that come to my mind are definitely No Man's Sky, which I don't need to explain anything about, Darktide, and Cyberpunk, which I had a friend very excited for Cyberpunk, and to the same level of hype I was cementing in myself before Hogwarts Legacy's launch, the same level of excitement and assurity that this game would be the game for them, and then Cyberpunk released. Here's the thing, because of those releases and because of how badly they burned me, I still had that fear in the back of my skull telling me, hey, just remember, No Man's Sky especially promised to be a much bigger game, a much better game than it was, with lies and like marketing deflection. I love you, Sean, and I love the team at Hello Games, but that release, you really fried my fucking brain's ability to trust game developers. Even while I was still choosing to be hyped for Hogwarts Legacy, and even while I was so excited, I was watching gameplay on repeat, I was constantly rewatching trailers, I was constantly looking up fan theories about what you can do in the game, I was looking for any scrap of information to do with Hogwarts Legacy. And even through all of that, despite me blindly choosing zealotously to just be hooked up on this game, in the back of my mind was still telling me, just remember, No Man's Sky happened. It's a little voice in the back of my head just constantly telling me, hey, you're choosing to potentially be this devastated. And yeah, that's the real gamble I took, was I knew that by willingly putting this much faith and trust into this game's release, that there was a chance that on launch, when it comes out, it's either mid or below average, which really is what I was thinking was going to happen. But there's a chance that it was going to happen, and then I would be devastated. I probably would never trust a game release for the next decade or two after that. I'd poured so much emotional energy into this game that if it had let me down, it probably would have been devastating. So eventually they revealed the release dates and times for PC and console, and I noticed that console worldwide released midnight on the 7th of February local time, which means if you lived in New Zealand, you would wake up on the 7th at midnight, like 33 hours ahead of everyone else, and you'd be able to launch the game. And while that's good, I agree that's good. That's how all release dates should work. That's how all release times should work. It's just midnight, local fucking time, you get the game that you paid for. That's how it should work for fucking everyone. I hate this stupid daytime conversion nonsense. I get that there are time zones and they exist because the sun revolves around us. We revolve around the sun. I just became a flat earther for a second. I get that, but... And you know what? You can even not do that. Don't do a synchronized release, oh, it's this time, local time. Sure, whatever, do it however you want. But here's what you don't fucking do. You don't release a game set for midnight, local time, on a day, and then have the PC version have its own set fucking release date. If you did the math, it took about, what was it? It's, it was 29 hours. There was a 29-hour difference between Australian console players and Australian PC players for Hogwarts Legacy. It was a 29-hour difference. People in Australia on a PS5 with it preloaded would be able to play the game, and then 29 hours later, the PC version would launch. That's not fucking cool. And because also we got told constantly that there would not be PC preloading for Hogwarts Legacy, which would mean, in my mind, that said, I can only download this 80 gig game when it launches and there's no preloading for me. Meaning that 29-hour difference was actually more like 36, 37-hour difference, because I had to download the game and my internet is garbage, which means that I would have to wait until launch of the game and then download it over the course of it. It would have taken me like 7 or 8 hours, which it did take me when I preloaded it. I'll get to that. What would have happened is, for nearly 2 days, I would have had the job of avoiding pretty much all social media, avoiding my YouTube subscription box, because I know if I saw like one of my favorite content creators playing the game, I wouldn't be able to help myself. I would watch them play it and then get myself hyped and get spoiled too, because I know how bad I am with this shit. I had a choice to make. Either allow myself to potentially get spoiled and to very realistically lose control of myself and look up things early on that I shouldn't be looking up, and torturing myself for over a day, way more than a day, trying to avoid this game so that I can wait for it to get on my computer and then download it and then keep waiting to then play the game that I've been waiting for 20 odd years. Or somehow I got a PS5 and pre-ordered it. My roommate has a PS5. I pre-ordered the deluxe edition on his PS5 so that I could play at midnight on the 7th with everyone else on some throwaway save where I don't really try and do anything or achieve anything. I'm not taking it too seriously. I'm just playing the game. That would take a little over a day, and then they would announce preloading for Steam, and then I realized that it wasn't that bad, and I didn't really have to pre-order it on PS5 just to avoid 29 hours of not being able to play the game. And you know what? I don't regret it. I don't regret it. In fact, I'd do it again. In fact, I did do it again. I pre-ordered the game for another friend. I pre-ordered the game 3 times. I pre-ordered the game once on Steam for me, once on PS5 for my friend, which I played, but now it's his game. And then I pre-ordered the game again for another friend on PC. And I'd do it again. Also, I could avoid waiting a little over a day just to play the game. And I'd do it again. So after all that effort and after all that trouble, was the investment actually worth it? Disclaimer, I want to make something extremely clear before I start this review. If you buy Hogwarts Legacy, you are not supporting J.K. Rowling's opinions. You are not transphobic. You are not evil. You are not literally advocating for the genocide of a protected group. I hate that I can say that and it be factually accurate. Protected group, like you're some endangered whatever. That's a different topic. This is gonna be very hard to get through. Me purchasing the funny gay wizard game does not contribute to the deaths of trans people, and if you think it does, get off this video. I'm not interested in hearing your opinions. I'm not interested in hearing the opinions of people who will lie to my face and try and twist what I do as to something malicious or underhanded in an attempt to apparently do awful things to people I've never met before or don't care about the existences of at all, and that shouldn't really be getting this involved in my personal life, making moral judgments on me for purchasing a product with funny gay wizards in it because I've been wanting this game for over 20 years of my fucking 25-year life, and you think that bullying me and harassing me and calling me a transphobe and a Nazi and a fascist and a racist and a murderer and actually accusing me of these moral wrongs will somehow get me on your side? Bruz, there's a lot I could say about that whole debacle. There is a lot of things I want to say about this stupid trans rights, whatever you want to call it, movement, Listen, I'm gonna put it as simply as I can. I don't give a shit what you do with your life. I don't give a shit what you refer to yourself as. I don't give a shit how you see yourself. If the way you imagine yourself to be helps you live life more comfortably, power to you, my friend. But the second you start trying to coerce me into using words and language that you want and to say things that you want and damning me for saying things that you don't want and actually calling me horrendous shit and claiming that I am contributing to the deaths of people, for it, if I don't go along with your delusions, you can piss off. All that this boycott and all that this negative emotion towards people who purchase a video game does is create more transphobes. That's all it does at the end of the day. You started with this game is only bought by people who are transphobic, and then started assigning that moniker to people who bought the game because, just like me, we've been waiting for a very good Harry Potter RPG for decades, while other people have been eaten like kings with video games and representation, and meanwhile the Wizarding World, all the Wizarding World has gotten is 8 mid to okay movies, dog shit to okay movies, plus the 3 Fantastic Beasts movies, which range from pretty good to some of the worst cinema I have ever seen in my entire life. And then the other book we get, Cursed Child, don't get me started. And the games we got, oh yeah, the real, like, the movie tie-in games we stopped getting back in, like, the PS3 era, and there hasn't been anything like them since, and all we've gotten is the goddamn Candy Crush ripoff, Hogwarts Mystery, which is just pay-to-play nonsense, and that's it. And Wizards United, which shut down. Do I have to say anything else? No, but apparently purchasing a video game that your inner child was screaming at you to wish into existence, and then it happened, it makes you transphobic. Fuck it. You know what? Fine. You know what? If you happen to be trans, and you happen to have this opinion that buying Hogwarts Legacy makes me transphobic, then yeah, I'm transphobic of you. Fuck off. Let me enjoy my stupid gay wizard game, or just shut the fuck up. And that's all I'm gonna say about any of that nonsense, because frankly, it's not, whether or not the game lives up to the expectations that we have put onto it is completely irrelevant from all this garbage surrounding it. So I'm gonna eat around the trash, and I'm gonna address the game itself. Is it worth the investment? After all this stigmatization, after all this harassment, after all this name-calling, after all these moral judgments made because of a product purchase, after all this wait, after all this anticipation, after all these expectations pushed onto a development team that made Cars 2, was it all worth it? I'm going to start with the worst things I can say about the game first, because that's going to be quicker to get through than the good shit. Oh no, have I spoiled my thoughts about the game yet? Oh no. So, there are quite a lot of bugs, actually. I didn't encounter many of the performance issues that many other people were experiencing. My game ran fine, actually. I was getting smooth 90 frames per second on all ultra settings, on all the highest. I was running the game 90 FPS on average, all ultra settings, turned to the absolute highest, and I was playing fine. There was very rarely any performance dips. There was very rarely any FPS dips. My game ran smooth as butter. I've heard, and I can understand, that there are many performance issues with the game, and I understand that to such a bad degree that there are negative reviews being left purely because of the bad performance, even though they acknowledge that the game itself is amazing. So I fully believe that there are many performance issues with the game. I hope that they'll be ironed out, but for sake of argument, I experienced no such performance issues. In fact, I wouldn't even say I experienced any performance issues at all. All my bugs are purely to do with the game. One bug I found really common and really frankly annoying is that sometimes my parry indicator wouldn't light up. I have some footage of that. Sometimes, for no reason, an enemy will target you with an attack and launch an attack, and your character won't have the parry indicator pop up, so you don't know you're being attacked. And that has led to many times where I was hit by an attack that I probably shouldn't have been if there was an indicator for it. A really good example of that is during the Lord of the Shore boss fight. There's an attack that the Lord can do, which lasts approximately 2 fucking frames total, I think, maybe, but the parry indicator for one of his attacks lasts like a frame, and the amount of time you have to react to it is non-existent, so that's a negative for me. Just the entire Lord of the Shore fight, actually, I fucking hated, and I'd rather not repeat ever again. In a similar vein of cons to do with boss fights, the entire final boss is one of the worst final boss fights I've ever participated in any video game. That is, I'm talking purely from when you and Ranrock enter the room with the repository, and then he becomes the giant goblin metal dragon. That fight sucks. All of it. Every aspect of it. I would explain what I dislike about it, but if I did that, I would be doing nothing but describing the boss fight in its entirety. So go watch a video on it or something, or go and play the final boss fight. Go and buy Hogwarts Legacy and play the entire game, and then fight the final boss, and then come back here and tell me whether or not you agree with me. Fuck the entire final boss. The bits before the final boss are magnificent. I love the Hogwarts professors coming in as reinforcements, and like you actually see them actively contributing to the fight in the background as you're running past them trying to get to the repository. That's all fantastic. Like, oh, I love all of that. But then Ranrock becomes the dragon, and suddenly I want to rip my fucking balls off just to avoid that fight. The prologue takes way too long. The prologue is very deceptive. You might think it's just the starting bit where you are in the carriage and then go to the cliffs and then arrive at Hogwarts, and you might consider just that to be the prologue, but no, I consider the prologue done when you finally buy a broom. So when you do flying class, and then the kid, I forgot his name, and then the kid tells you, it's like, hey, you should go and buy a broom, and then you go and buy one broom. For those of you who are starting the game early, a broom is 600 gold, so keep that in mind, and make sure you have those funds on you before you go to Albi and go and buy a broom. But the second you buy a broom, the prologue is over, in my opinion. Because from that moment on, you can go wherever you want, you can fly any distance you desire, you can go wherever you want. There is no part of the world that is locked off to you. The only bits that would be locked off to you is like, oh, there's a dungeon that requires you to have Wingardium Leviosa or something. But that's different. If we're talking just the overworld, once you buy a broom, you can go anywhere you want. So I consider the prologue over when you get your broom. Unfortunately, it takes like 10 hours to get a broom. The prologue is way too long. I feel that you get a broom much later because they want you to first build up a collection of spells properly. That, I mean, learning stuff like Incendio, Wingardium Leviosa, and stuff like that is all useful, and Accio. You need to learn all that shit. It's for basic combat and puzzle solving. So you do need those spells, and I understand why they don't give you a broom before then, but holy shit, the whole prologue is just an arse-ache to go through. The worst part is when you have to fight the knights in Gringotts in the vault, because all you have at that point in the game is basic shot. Shut up. All you have in that point in the game is basic shot. So you're just standing there spamming R2 the entire time, rather than in contrast to late game combat, where you are like going through several combos of spells in your head and constantly swapping to spell diamonds that can accommodate those combos, and that makes the combat fun. But if you're just spamming basic casts like you have to in the prologue, it's very dry and very garbage. There's a lot of times where, like, dialogue will explain a game mechanic to you pretty much the perfect way it should, and then there will still be a tutorial box pop up to tell you how to run the game. Also, actually, alongside that, I played on hard for the entire time I first played the game, and I was still getting little tutorial tips, or, like, little tutorial hints at the bottom of the screen whenever I, like, fast traveled anywhere or landed anywhere, constantly, when I'm so far into the game that I have mastered those systems so fucking long ago, I don't need to hear them anymore. But there's no option to turn off the tutorial boxes. You will always get them. There will always be like little hints throughout the game trying to assist you at a system you've already perfected. My gripes don't just lie with the prologue. The entire story, I find, is incredibly poorly paced. I think it's a major problem when you complete the story for the first time and you don't really appreciate it that much. In fact, you find it like quite, your brain settles and it either goes like it's a mid story or it's a really bad story, and I think there's one very good reason for that. It's because it's paced like shit. Characters constantly repeating bits of the story that you know as a player to other characters who don't know. While I appreciate that as like a cohesive way of expositioning dumping, I guess, because it makes sense that your character would have to explain things to other characters, because those other characters just shouldn't magically know things, and I appreciate the organic inclusion of your character informing those other characters and how much information they give them. But I don't need to see my character re-explain something that I've known since the start of the game to a character like Sebastian. I think the story really clicks together in your mind after you complete all the Keeper's trials and after you get Sambakar's memory. Because the motivations and intentions of the Keepers are kept very purposefully vague for the vast majority of the game, because the Keepers are very secretive, shockingly, of the information they have. So you're purposefully fed information at an agonizingly slow pace, especially key information that is important to the story, which you can only get through the Pensieves in the trials. But then when you get the final memory for the Pensieve, the entire story clicks together, and that feeling of, oh, I get it now, is great, but I had to endure this very poorly paced story to arrive here. I think the issue with the story is that there are incredibly long periods of time where you are not given a lot of information and not a lot of not exposition that you need to actually understand the story. All you're given as you play the game are reminders of why you don't understand the story, and that constant reminders that you need to understand the story, but then the game doesn't allow you to understand the story. So you're just getting frustrated at these long periods of time where occasionally is broken up by, here's something you should know but you don't yet, bye! Or like, here's something you should understand but don't yet, bye, and it's just on loop. I think the pacing makes the story extremely frustrating to sit through, but when you actually pick apart the story, if it was paced so much better, it'd be so much better to listen to, and it'd be so much easier to sit through. But as it stands now, the positives only outweigh the negatives of the story enough with the pacing issues to make it mid, in my opinion, to sit through. Oh, and my last con is that hard mode isn't hard enough, and I need a very hard difficulty. Hard is too easy for me, but that might be because I am rocking an Unforgivable curse build that pretty much it focuses on using Avada Kedavra as much as possible to as much benefit as possible. So that might be a me thing. I am actually going to try out a non-Dark Path playthrough where I reject the Unforgivable curses, and I'm gonna see if the combat becomes any harder or easier without the Unforgivable curses. My guess is it's gonna become way harder, which is what I'm looking for now. I'm not saying the Unforgivable curses are too overpowered or that they ruin the combat. The Unforgivable curses should be overpowered, and they should trivialize combat. They're the Unforgivable curses. It's kind of why they were created in the first place, was to make it one-sided. The Imperious Curse, Cruciatus Curse, and the Killing Curse were designed to make combat one-sided. Whoever uses the curse wins. Yeah, no shit, they're using an Unforgivable curse. That's their job. Actually, I do have one more con that I didn't think about writing down, but it still holds true. This game, Legacy pretends to be an RPG where you have control over the story and what happens and how you build up your character, but in reality, you can't. Your character pretty much, you can choose how your character reacts to certain things and how they say certain things, but really the only major decision you have is over the ending, and that is a yes or no question. Your character, for all intents and purposes, is on a set path with set decisions made by them that you really have no control over. You can't really even make your character go fully not dark if you count being a light wizard as never killing once, because all the ancient magic finishes pretty much guarantee death. So your only options are don't get the Unforgivable Curses, and don't use Ancient Magic finishes, which is half your arsenal. So you're just sticking yourself to comboing enemies forever. That sounds like a hard mode, actually. And even then, you're still throwing out, like, Confringo and Bombarda, and you're transfiguring them into explosions, and you're cutting them in half and stuff. You are, if you're not murdering people, you're severely hurting them at the very least. So, you really don't have that much control over the story, or even your own character. You can choose flavor text for your character, essentially, and how they react to people. You can choose to be a cunt in side quests, but that doesn't have a massive impact overall on the game. I do want to say, a lack of complete total RPG elements is fine. I don't need to be in complete control over everything I do. I can control how my character looks, I can control the spell loadout, I can control where they go, when they go, I can control how much of a smartass they be to students, or even if they're cunts to students. That's all I really need. Personally, I understand why there are plenty of people who are upset that it's not a complete total RPG where you have full control over like how the outcome happens and the influences you have, like in something like Fallout New Vegas. I understand, because I would love that too, but what we have isn't that bad. So what's good about the game? Combat is sex. Even if the combat ends in 3 seconds because I decided to get a fat fucking chain of Avada Kedavra on like 18 enemies all at once, it still floods my brain with dopamine. Combat pretty much no matter what, on any difficulty, is always satisfying and fun, except on story mode, which I found was way too handholdy, but I mean, I did read the fucking tin, and I got what was inside the tin, so I guess I'm not allowed to be mad about that. I chose Game Journalist difficulty, and I got Game Journalist difficulty, can't complain, really. People were memeing on the gay breakdancing that the characters do when they're in combat, but I personally love it, and I think it elevates the game. I don't know how to explain it, just watching my character do a Michael Jackson while also murdering a troll is just satisfying in some way, and it contributes to the dopamine flow. Combat pace changes rather radically when you get a hold of dark magic, actually. Initially, before you get the Unforgivable Curses, combat is mostly figuring out combos of how to keep several enemies away from you at a time while you're focusing one down, and then focus another down, and then disable the rest of them, get them distracted. Combat was very much a dance of trying to mitigate the enemy as much as possible, even behind their dogshit AI, which I forgot to make a con of that. The enemy's AI in combat isn't that great. But even when it's not that great, that doesn't mean that hard mode is easy. Hard mode will still kick your ass until you get the Unforgivable Curses. So combat turns from this water dance, this synchronized waltz of you and the enemy, and taking turns trying to mitigate each other and whittle each other down until one of you is dead, turns from that into how fast can I get Avada Kedavra charged while using Crucio to stun anything that's too much of a threat, or using Imperio to just completely dominate a threat and make it my threat onto the enemy. Get Avada Kedavra, and then chain Avada Kedavra between the cursed targets. But like I said before, dark magic should be overpowered. Dark magic should be overpowered. There needs to be a reason why you'd be willing to go down this path, and I love how actually evil you do feel while using the Unforgivable Curses. You do feel like this is magic you shouldn't be using or abusing, and the enemies will also constantly remind you of that, and constantly scream and declare about how you're using an Unforgivable against them. It's great. So combat without the Unforgivable Curses, it takes longer, it's more planning, it's more strategy, but that's how it should be. That is how light magic dueling should be. But when you involve dark magic, then it's just a game of who can kill the other fastest, and you're using the three strongest spells in the lore, so of course it becomes easier. If using the Unforgivable Curses didn't change combat, and if they didn't make it easier, I'd be upset. All of the ancient magic finishes are amazing. Every single one. I have yet to encounter an ancient magic finisher that I didn't like. My favorite has got to be turning the spiders tiny and crushing them. That is hilarious shit. I do, however, love the lightning one, because especially when you fight Ashwinder Executioners, where they're doing this whole rain dance shenanigan shit, where they're trying to summon up and conjure lightning, and it takes them 8 fucking minutes to do it, and then you just come in and go bang, and just fucking rock them like a hurricane with a goddamn bolt from Zeus himself. Outside of the Mojave Wasteland from Fallout New Vegas and the lands between from Elden Ring, this is my favorite open world map to explore of all time. It requires getting the broom as early as possible, which I brought up earlier. That's unfortunate, but I mean, why would you not want to get a broom before exploring? I would not want to explore this map on foot. Oh man, that hurts. That hurts my feet just thinking about it. For one, the world map... For one, the world map is massive. And for two, there is always something interesting to explore on a side path or somewhere like nearby to your main objective, or even on the way, that is worth investigating. The thing about exploring in this game is that it is very tightly connected with progression. You can only earn XP in Legacy by completing challenges. You can only complete challenges by either entering combat and doing specific feats, or defeating a certain number of enemies, or doing a specific combo with a specific enemy, or by completing the side content that you find on the map. For example, the Merlin Trials, the Ancient Magic Fountains, or whatever you want to call them. The Flu Network. I mean, I guess, well, finding the Flu Network is important too if you want to get everywhere fast. There are canned dungeons all over the place. There's the astronomy tables. There's the infamous foes, which is like boss fights or mini boss fights. There's tons of secrets dotted around through the map. There's tons of side quests dotted around throughout the map. And the more you do of any of these things, you can go out and just wander randomly in this open world for an hour or two and choose to do anything. And no matter what you choose to do, you are actively contributing to your progression in the game and earning experience, or making progress towards like an item that you really want, or making it easier for you to explore the map, or just finding a boss and ticking that off the list and just getting whatever they offer. Because of the whole you can only earn experience through challenges thing, it means that early on in the game, pretty much as soon as you get the broom, if you choose to just go flying around and choose to do anything you want enough times, if you dedicate to the side content as early as possible, you will become so much stronger because of it. When I got access to the map chamber, and when I finally got access to my talent trees, I was level 17. I've seen most people only get... I think I was level 19, and I only see most people get there at level 12, but because I was insane and going around and doing all the side shit and exploring the content and just checking off as many things as I can from the list, I was rewarded for that constantly. It got me new appearances for my transmog. It got me new items and shit I can conjure in the Room of Requirement when I eventually got to that. It got me experience. Just doing side quests and doing side content gets you experience, which is the only way to do it, which is just a further incentivization to do it. But exploration is fun, and doing this side content is also fun, but it also massively helps you make progress through the game. So it's a positive feedback loop. It's a positive feedback loop of you doing whatever the hell you want and then getting all the rewards in return and getting everything you need, from experience to the items you wear on your back. The Room of Requirement is probably the perfect student hub for the game. The sheer level of control and customization you possess over the Room of Requirement is immense. The ability to manipulate the roof, manipulate the floor, manipulate the walls to however you want them to look, to putting any decorations you want pretty much anywhere on the floor, on the wall, on the ground is like a... Because the floor decorations are different from ground decorations, because rugs and shit, you can put stuff on top of rugs and stuff. Figuring out little hubs for your potion brewing and your plant grass growing and your plant growing and your beast care and all that, and where you put your facilities and where you choose to decorate and how you choose to let it look is all beautiful. And that turns back into the exploration thing, because as you explore, as you do the side content, as you're earning XP, you're earning transmogs for yourself, and you're earning items for the Room of Requirement to personalize it better to your needs. And there's so much shit you can put in. Growing plants, brewing potions, and taking care of the beasts, like, at a surface level, just sounds like a fun little distraction the devs decided to add, or like just something that was added last minute as an effort to please some fans. I don't know, it just feels like something that was just tacked on there just to please some people, sort of like how a lot of kids games just have every genre of level in the entire game, pretty much. Like, they'll always have, like, a stealth level and a driving level and a dance level just to distract you. It felt like one of those. But then you actually get into it. The potion brewing is inoffensive and relatively easy. You would think it'd be harder, because early on it's hard to, like, afford the recipes and the ingredients and, like, and then afford the spellcraft to, like, grow plants properly and to properly build up into a proper rhythm of brewing potions. But then eventually it peters out and it gets easier, and you just find it like, oh yeah, I just need to make a potion, okay, just do that. And the same thing with plants. You think it's hard early on, but then you get into it and you're like, oh no, it's not annoyingly distracting. It is tolerably distracting, but it offers you a lot of reward. Combat plants are insanely overpowered. There was that guy who made the Chinese chomping cabbage build, where he could pretty much destroy any boss in like 3 seconds if he just summons like 20 chomping cabbages. Plants are strong as hell in this game. Potions are really fucking powerful. You drink a Maxima potion and you get the upgrade for Maxima potion to let it break through shields on basic cast. There's so much shit you can do with a Maxima potion. Edurus potion if you just want to tank shit, and you can make that even better by making it invulnerable. Invisibility potion duration is 4 seconds at first, and you're like, oh, that's really bad, actually, and you're right. But then you upgrade that to 10 seconds, and at first you might think, that doesn't sound like a lot. 10 seconds of pure invisibility that can't be interrupted in any way, mid-combat. You can literally be in the middle of killing goblins, chug an invisibility potion, and they'll pretend that you were never there, and then you can just Petrificus them all down, or you could just kill them all, and they won't really do anything, because they can't fucking see you, because you just chugged an invisibility potion, and you still have like 7 seconds of invisibility left. They can't do anything. And the focus potion is probably gonna be the crutch of many builds, because, being able to reduce the spell cooldown on anything, plus the upgrade that makes it so it's constantly active as long as you're using slotted spells. That's insane. That's even without incorporating dark magic, because dark magic plus the focus potion is pretty much essential. But like, but I would imagine a non-dark magic playthrough would need a focus potion even more, actually, than a dark magic playthrough. So I said before that the story has a lot of pacing issues that massively drag it down into the depths of being tolerable at best, and I still hold true to that. The story's pacing problems are its biggest weakness. The fact about like whether or not you have control over the story, again, doesn't impact my decision at all to whether or not it's good or not. I don't care. I don't need a Skyrim, okay? I don't need every game to be Skyrim. I accidentally made a reference there. So I still stick by that the story is like mid to tolerably good at best, and that is purely because of the pacing problems. However, every single character in the game is fantastic, and I love all of them. I love all the Hogwarts professors with no exception. I love all the companions, no exception. I love the villains, no exception. Victor is intimidating and pathetic, but dangerous too, which makes him the fear of Victor Rookwood just being able to waltz into Hogsmeade whenever he wants and just point at a child he wants and almost get away with it is insane. Ranrock and his loyalists are properly fanatical, as they should be, as all fanatics should be, after all. Got the reasoning behind it being all, goblins own everything that they make mentality. It makes it really understandable as to why there's this massive rift between goblins and wizard kind, because I'm not a massive fan of a species that assumes that just because you paid for something doesn't mean you own it. Yeah, I don't like that either. I also don't like a fanatical group of ideologues who will kidnap your children and extort them or murder them just to get to you because they don't like the fact that once upon a time 1,000 years ago Godric Gryffindor got a sword from a goblin and didn't give it back to him. I had to take off those gloves because I'm pretty sure that they're like a few sizes too small for me, because I felt the circulation getting lost from my hand. So Ranrock and Victor are fantastic antagonists, and and poachers are an easy antagonist, because I mean, you've got Victor's lot, right, which are just a bunch of dark wizards who think that wizard kind deserve a power above the goblins because it belongs to them for some reason. But then you have the poachers whose entire MO is just we hunt animals, sell them or kill them and mutilate their bodies to sell the body parts for profit. and we also torture animals. And you've got like one of the easiest to hate antagonist groups in the game. No, sorry, actually, if we're comparing like the difference between the goblins and the dark wizards and the poachers are easily the easiest to hate faction in the entire game. For obvious reason. The professors, like Headmaster Black, like you're meant to hate him, but he's voiced by Simon Pegg, who adds like a level of annoying charisma on top with his voice acting skills, which makes it great. The mission where you polyjuice into Headmaster Black, and just the knowledge that Simon Pegg is the guy who's speaking for the character as you're like bumbling around and trying to pretend to be Headmaster Black, it makes it so much better. He's incredibly easy to hate, but he's also, by extension, incredibly easy to make fun of. For the companions, my favorite companion is Sebastian. It has to be Sebastian, and it's outside of the fact that he's the guy who gives you the Unforgivable curses. Sebastian's story and the quests associated with it are a great tale of the damage dark magic can do, and why it's not really worth it. You have Ominous Gaunt, who is born blind and was tortured as a child with the Cruciatus curse, in the family of the Gaunts, which, if you're not a book fan and you don't know who the Gaunts are, spoiler alert, that's Voldemort's family. But anyway, the Gaunts are famously pureblood supremacists who are all insane and they all love dark magic, you know? And to have a Gaunt be one of the voices of reason for you in this game to tell you why dark magic isn't worth the cost, that's amazing. To have Solomon Sallow be the ex-Aure who constantly tells you that dark magic isn't worth it, a good position to be in when you're educating others on the risks of dark magic is an Aure, because it is an Aure's job. Aures aren't just police, they're dark wizard bounty hunters, basically. It is an Aure's job to understand dark magic very intimately, because how else you expected to fight against someone who knows a lot about dark magic if you don't know anything about it? So Aures are very well in tuned with dark magic, and Solomon constantly telling Sebastian it's not worth it, and Sebastian saying, no, we gotta try at least, and Solomon saying, no, we shouldn't even try. That's a great dichotomy, because you can't just automatically hate Solomon because he's right, and you can't hate Sebastian because what he's doing, ultimately trying to do, is very noble and very pure-hearted, but he's using the wrong tools to go about it. Sebastian's downfall is amazingly told, and it's very easy to empathize with and to understand why he's willing to go through these measures in order to save his sister, and it's all very believable. That's the best part of it all, is that it's very believable. This is a story that would exist in the wizarding world. I can believe that, and oh, it's one of the best dark wizard tales that you could probably tell. I originally didn't like Natty, because I just assumed that her entire character was about, I am from Uganda, and I am from Wagadu, and that's it, and that'd be her entire character, and that wouldn't have any other nuance or any other depth outside of that. And then I started talking with her and like being like, okay, fine, I'll do your content and I'll listen to what you have to say. And the more and more I did of Natty's content, and then I spoke with her mother a few times, which is a professor. The more I spoke with her, the more I listened, the more I realized how much I actually love Natty's story. Natty's story is very simple, but it's one that is very easy to become emotionally attached to as it progresses. Not at first, though, because it's that story pacing shit of trying to be like, we're not going to tell you everything just yet, but like in its own brand of shitty pacing. I like Natty, is what I'm trying to say. I didn't like Natty, but then as I completed her content and I completed her arc, I liked Natty. And all of Poppy's content is lovely. And to such a point that I don't want to even talk in depth about any of these companions' stories. I know I said at the start there's going to be spoilers, but I want go experience it. I love all of them. I love all the companions. I love all their stories. I love Sebastian and Poppy especially, and Natty is still great. Professor Fig is one of my favorite characters. He's a fantastic mentor. Fig's involvement in the story, mostly concerning his wife, and her being the crux of the entire Goblin Rebellion, well, not really, but like nearly the crux of the entire Goblin Rebellion with Ranrock and all that, and her involvement is all very well done. Fig's reasonings for being very secretive between the Hogwarts professors and any ministry officials, and pretty much anyone outside of you actually, is completely understandable, because he even tells you that for ages that they've been trying to warn everyone about the Goblin Uprising and about how there's a problem, and no one listened to him because they all thought he was crazy, and then he died because of it. Spoiler, sorry. Actually, no, I will talk about that. People seem to think that spoiling the ending and about how Professor Fig dies and about how Anne was actually cursed by Victor and not by a goblin, they seem to think that's a really big gotcha. Are you familiar with this fandom even remotely? Snape kills Dumbledore, Fred dies, Moody dies, Dobby dies. What else is there? I don't fucking know. Like, Snape dies, but he was a good guy all along. Harry names his kid this and that. Do you understand how many spoilers this fandom has gone through since its release, since inception? Do you understand the spoiler campaigns that we've been through? And for some reason, you seem to think that copying a tactic from, like, 15 years ago, where people would go out on the street corners and go, Snape killed Dumbledore, you seem to think that that's going to affect us at all? Any intelligent Potterhead who lived through those spoiler campaigns would know that the second they got the game, to just shut off social media and to just ignore everything, play the shit out of the game, finish it, and then go on social media, because we're not fucking stupid. Because if you ever went to a post where someone posted that, like one of them was of Lisa in front of from The Simpsons, in front of that thing that spoiled everything, most of the replies are people saying, yeah, hi, I already finished the game, this doesn't do anything to me, because we're not fucking stupid, and we've lived through this before. So I've been going on about the characters and how great the characters are, like all the professors. I love all the professors, I already said that, for their own reasons each, but I love all the professors, I love the companions, I love the main character, somewhat. It's, that one's shaky, but I love all the characters associated with them. I love George, Rip George. I love the story of the Keepers. I love the characters of the Keepers. I love Isadora Morganach as an antagonist that isn't an antagonist because she's dead by the time the game happens. But I love her as an antagonist of the story of the Keepers because she's a fucking monster. I didn't get to talk about this with many people, but I love... Oh man, okay, I love the story of Isadora a lot because it's very believable. A common trope among all these characters is that their stories and arcs are incredibly believable and very realistic. Isadora had that arc where she pulled the pain from her dad and he was fine for a bit. And then she kept it contained, and it's like, oh, thank you, and you're like kind of going, okay, how can this get worse? And it gets to a point where she's forcefully taking people's negative pains from their hearts and huffing them as drugs, and you're kind of like, oh, this is, oh, what the fuck? And then you see her dad, who's just completely emotionless and unable to feel happiness or sadness or anything. And you realize that what she's doing to people is worse than a Dementor's kiss. And she does all this in some blind attempt to be, like, a very good person. Because like a child thinks, oh, but if I just stop people being upset, and then they won't be upset anymore. Humans require struggle to improve. We require to be challenged in order to adapt and overcome. It's survival of the fittest. You've probably heard this a million times before. Some pains are good to hold on to, like the loss of a loved one. You remember them and you remember what they stood for and who they were as an individual. If you weren't upset by the loss of them, you wouldn't care, because you're not going to feel happy about them dying. You're not going to feel, if you took away all the negatives you're going to feel about that person dying, you take away who that person was. What? So you find out that what she does to people in this stupid fucking illusionified version of, I want to help you by just taking away your reason for living, basically, eventually turns into, oh, I take away all emotion from your heart in general, which, as I just said, is worse than a Dementor's kiss. It goes from that into, also she's getting high off it like a drug, into... she's doing this to kids. And I love that the second the Keepers find out that Isadora is doing this shit to the students, what do? They confront her, and they're like, come with us to Azkaban and stop this shit. now. There's no alternative. And she goes, no, but I don't want people to be sad anymore, and then tries to fight them off. And then Sandakar just straight up Avada Kedavras her, and it's like, thank you! That's the best decision any character has made the entire game. Isadora willingly putting kids through a worse version of the Dementor's Kiss and refusing to stop it because I want to help people shouldn't be sad anymore. Yeah, that warrants an Avada Kedavra to the face. That warrants a killing curse. Absolutely. Absolutely deserve to be executed on the spot, and I'm glad for the first time there are some morally good characters who aren't afraid of using that spell to end the life of someone who, if left alive, would cause so much more harm than good in this blind attempt to cure the world, because I don't want people to be sad anymore. I'm glad Isadora got murked. I'm glad she got murdered like that. I am so... That's one of the best parts of the whole story. Well, I actually went on a little break just then. I had some lunch. Some family friends came over to visit, so I forgot what I was talking about. Everything else I can really say about the game is, like, small bullet points, or, like, dot points to refer to. For example, the third trial is sex. I love that the house elf kitchen is not only in the game and not only in Hogwarts, but also not exclusive to one house, particularly because it's a part of the Gryffindor house quest for finding the pages of Jackdaw. But anyone of any house can enter the kitchen as long as they tickle the pear, which is great. Seeing the giant squid at all in the game, even in small bits, is great, because I'm not sure if you remember, but the giant squid doesn't exist in the movies. It is purely a product of the books, and always has been, and has never left there until now. Now, the giant squid is in the game. Your method for learning spells is brought back from the older games, where you would trace the wand movement, and that's how you would get the spell. They brought that back. Even if it's a one-off thing for every spell you learn, it's still really good that it's there, because it's just like, oh hey, I remember when they do that. I remember when you finally got to do the one for Avada Kedavra, and I forgot it's the lightning bolt shape, which is why Harry's scar is in the shape of a lightning bolt. And that was really cool. There is a very tiny miniature Quidditch display you can find and put into the room of requirement that is just a very intricately detailed and animated, very tiny Quidditch game, which is very adorable. One little complaint I have is that you can't actually sit at any chairs or anything. There's no emotes or anything of that kind, so you can't just, like, sit down somewhere. There's no photo mode or anything. But despite that, you can go around picking up, like, butterbeer and teacups and, like, eat candy and nuts and stuff, and fruit and sweets. There's so much you can interact with, but you can't roleplay that well, because you can't sit down, you can't, like, emote around in the open world, which you should be able to. The main thing that wins me over with my love for Hogwarts Legacy, that makes me love it more beyond the fact that it is a competently made game that is very good and satisfying to play, beyond that, the thing that elevates it the most is being a book fan and being a fan of the franchise and acknowledging and clearly seeing and understanding the fact that it took a dev team that must love and care for the source material to an immense degree. The developers of this game have to be fans of the franchise, and they have to be massive fans of the franchise to achieve and put in as much detail as they have in this game to such an astonishing degree. The field guide lore pages prove that enough. You can constantly go around the world getting field guides for descriptions of lore and stuff you would only ever be able to find in the books and nowhere else. And it is extremely clear that the people who made this game love the universe, and they wanted you to experience it the way they wanted to experience it. It is very, very clear that they love and care for the Harry Potter franchise and world. The music also, I didn't even talk about the music. The music is perfect. The entire soundtrack is beautifully crafted, honestly. I've been using Harry Potter music from the video games as background music for most of my recent videos now, and I'm gonna now transition from using the music from the old games for using music from Hogwarts Legacy, because the music is fucking gorgeous! It's very clear to me that the developers intended to create the perfect Wizarding World experience for as many people as they possibly could, and to make it as inclusive as possible. And they succeeded with flying colors. This is the best Harry Potter game ever released. Quick side note, I really like how early in the game, when you're hunting down potion ingredients, one ingredient for the focus potion is Dugbog tongues, and initially, when you're killing Dugbogs early in the game, they're quite a chore. They're a bit tanky. They require a bit of strategy to actually dart around and figure out how to take them down effectively. And then you get the Unforgivable curses, and it turns from a 5-minute skirmish into, oh hey, there's a Dugbog.
Avada Kedavra.
Neat. Because a love for the franchise is evident in the development team, obviously, in turn, a love for the franchise from a player's perspective elevates the game immensely. If you're not a fan of the Wizarding World or anything about it, or you think it's all gay and you're not really that interested, or you're loosely interested, then this game doesn't shine as brightly in your eyes. Although, even in that regard, I have a few friends who aren't even fans of the Harry Potter franchise at all. I can name 3 or 4 off the top of my head that have all bought and played the game, and they love the game. So keep in mind that this review is written by a person who is obsessed with this world and lore and universe, because magic is just, I just love magic, and Harry Potter is incredibly accessible, and its lore is fascinating. To me, Hogwarts Legacy isn't just the greatest Harry Potter game ever made. To me, it's one of the best games I've ever played. The only game I can think of that can even come close to the level of happiness and joy I get from playing Hogwarts Legacy is Fallout New Vegas. And if you don't know my opinion on Fallout New Vegas, it is the greatest RPG ever made, and my favorite game of all time, if we're talking objectively. But if we're talking in terms of pure enjoyment and pure satisfaction, a prior connection to a franchise and lore and world that I've loved since a childhood, then emotionally, Hogwarts Legacy is my favorite game of all time. It's like what I brought up earlier, the pool of magic-orientated action RPGs in recent years has gotten thin. You're either getting nothing that comes close to what you want, or it's something so awful that it doesn't even deserve to be spoken. We should say forspoken. Or you get mouth breathers who say, just play Skyrim, forehead. It's just magic, forehead. It's just it's just a magic system in an RPG, Lamau. It's just the same game, forehead. Not really understanding what it means to have a satisfying magic system in a video game, which Skyrim definitely does not. Hogwarts Legacy doesn't just meet every expectation I had. It reaches expectations that I didn't have in the first place, and it manages to do things I thought for sure they weren't going to do with this game, because I thought for sure it was too much work and too much bother. I was confident that the dev team didn't care that much to put that much work into a product, thinking that they were just doing it to get a quick buck at the end of the day, and that they had no love for the franchise and lore that they were representing. And it turns out we couldn't have given this game to a better development team if we tried. And whether or not you agree or disagree with me on the fact of whether or not it is a good game or a great game, there is one thing that is for certain. It is the best Harry Potter game ever made. That cannot be denied at all. Listen, I might be autistic, but I know what I love. The entire time I've been recording this and writing it and voicing it, I've been constantly thinking in the back of my head, man, I should be playing Hogwarts Legacy right now. I've achieved peak brain rot.